Ella Orleans, who is a very good composer and musician, but she's not from the field of opera, which is also why I asked Ella Orleans to write music which will be for opera singers, but also non-opera singers, and I wanted to have them work together, so that there's even some false singing next to very good singing. So the opera singers are, some of them are the divas from the Polish National Opera.
Could you find all these great singers and actors?
So in fact, I told you at first, I told you that I don't work with professional actors, but this is actually a work in which I did work with professional opera musicians. Most of my films, I would say 90 or even more % of my works are done with non-professional actors. However, in this case, I truly needed, I just simply, if I wanted an opera, I needed professionals.
Sure.
So I did it. And that work was originally an opera performance, which was done in the Warsaw Chamber Opera. And then I decided to turn it into a film.
When was it first?
It was staged in 2015. And then in the end of the year, the premiere of the film was 2016.
Opera and total art, different levels of emotion could be built together. So it's more than just a stage drama, and of course more than visual arts. So it's so fascinating. But I think other people also want to comment.
Yes. A few questions. First, when you at the beginning, when you talk about in 2013, you went to Hungary.
Yes.
And that's when they closing their Ministry of Culture.
They've already did, yeah. They already had closed at the time. Yes.
Yeah. You didn't say what is the implication of that closing of Ministry of Culture, and also I'm wondering the work like you introduced here. Is there anything to do with the Ministry of Culture, and or well, Ministry of Culture in Poland? I just wonder,
how it's related to the Ministry of Culture?
Is there anything to do? Yeah.
You mean in the sense of meaning or in the sense of production?
No, production.
Production. Yes. So the work you speaking about the work that just the Offence, yes, which I showed at the very beginning.
Okay, including this.
So all of my works are produced from different grants and scholarships. The Offence was produced. Difficult for me to say exactly where the money came from, if this is your question, because the Offence was produced when I was nominated for the Polish Art Prize, which is given by the National Gallery. However, the Art Prize budget comes from Deutsche Bank, the Deutsche Bank Prize, the one that Germany has. So the work was produced, every nominated artist was producing a new piece for the exhibition, and I produced this work. So I don't know exactly where the money comes from, but obviously the National Gallery is under the Ministry of Culture. So whether the money went from the Deutsche Bank Foundation, or if it went from the National Gallery, it went through the National Gallery in any way. So yes, my budgets come from different sources. Nowadays, I guess it will be less and less coming from the Polish Ministry of Culture. But if you're implying that I'm being critical using the national money, is this what you want to say?
No, I just want to know, the Polish Ministry of Culture following a quite a European model.
Yes.
Firstly, maybe in France.
Yes.
Just yesterday, we are talking about Jacques Lange's, Jacques Lange, the Minister of Culture in Netherlands through the 80s.
Yes.
Through the 80s, which is made a lot of change and set the models, set the model of this relationship with those artists or the creators or something like that, which is quite different from the situation of the United States,
Yes.
where they don't have this kind of edifice of Ministry of Culture. So their artistic tradition have a different relationship. So just wondering. So sounds.
Maybe related to this point, you were suggesting the censorship, right?
Yes.
In the environment. So this cutting down of this Ministry of Culture, but also in Poland, also similar censorship. So then the action is self-intervention.
Yes.
Yeah, so you were referring to that moment in the society, is it?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But
That's
we
exactly
couldn't
what.
really tell from the
I know.
dialogue or the words,
Mhm.
right? There's nothing maybe taboo or sensitive, I think. I don't know.
Yes, so I think that because I cut the film for you, it's even without cutting it, I think that the narration is made to be a little bit, if I can address Oscar and Sofia Hansen, whom I spoke about later, like an open form in which you can actually put a lot of meanings. So I'm suggesting some meanings, but I'm not telling it straightforward. So the narration is quite spread and difficult to put together anyway, and when I cut the film and give you just a little bit of it, it's difficult, I know. But yes, that's what I meant with the hiccup. I wanted to say like what the effect control has on society and what happens if we cannot say everything.
Yeah.
But so I wanted there are some few issues that I would like to come back to. So about criticism of culture, as much as criticism of philosophy, and all that you deal with here, I think that scientists and artists have to be independent, and they should be independent even though they are funded by the national money. And if we're not giving freedom to be independent, we are just not going to make anything, And I think that this is, that we are, sorry, I'm just going to make this, that we, simply, if we're supposed to produce, why is this happening? That's strange. If we're supposed to produce any valuable reflection, which is going to push culture forward and push society forward, then we've got to have independence, and we've got to be able to be thinking freely. So I think that is obvious, right? And so, yes, I think there has to be space for critical art, and there has to be space for my criticism from the national grants, And but obviously, the limitations introduced by authoritarian governments are obviously, and I believe that this is, I totally believe in new forms and restructuring institutions, but the way authoritarian governments usually restructure institutions, maybe not only, but mostly, why they restructure institutions is to limit the freedom of different fields, and nowadays that would be to limit the freedom of of our speech. And that is the case of Hungary, and also that is the case slowly, it isn't happening fully now yet, but in certain fields it started happening in Poland now too. So for example, the field of theater is nearly entirely taken over at the moment. Private theaters, which are the most progressive ones, no, sorry, that isn't true what I said. The progressive theaters are both on the side of in the private sector and the national sector. But basically, it's censorship through cutting funds, but also censorship through changing the people on the important positions, directors and so on, creative directors. In the field of art, hasn't been changed everywhere yet. But yes, but also there's all sorts of different types of censorship that is happening.
I'll continue my questions. I turn to the superpower.
Yeah.
It's a work of 2016. Right? I just wonder, is it addressing the current, as your title of the speech, unstable politics, the current one, or it refers to, or it seems to me like a belated caricature of the socialist planned economy with its ambition and with its stupidity and with its doomed failure. You know, all these seems like a caricature of the planned economy of the socialist system, or maybe it's still addressing today's political situation. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So this is very funny. As I said before, I think a lot of things. This is very strange to say, being an artist, you know. But I've heard it many times from friends working in different fields that there is something like an anticipation, like artists saying things or expressing things before they're even visible. And I have a feeling that like all these works I showed you before were actually done before the current government took over and before the very visible changes started to appear in Poland. But obviously these tendencies were around, and it's not only Poland where it happens, so maybe I've observed it happening elsewhere and just started working on it. But this work, I wrote this project late 2014, so it was, and then I performed it in 2015 and made the film in 2016. So it was too early for me to directly address the current situation. However, yes, when I watch it today, I think it's so much about my current situation in Poland. But on the other hand, I've shown it in Japan not so long ago, and I had this incredible meeting with the audience in Japan where people said, "Oh, it's so much about our current political situation in Japan," you know, and they could directly link certain things that the characters in the films are saying with what the government is doing and how it's behaving and how the society is limited, and that's maybe a more general, even cultural thing. But they found a lot of links. So maybe it's a form open enough to actually fit all sorts of different authoritarian, I think I can say this, authoritarian settings.
I can make my connection to the current China model, where all the something.
I was hoping you would say that.
No,
Yeah.
it's too obvious.
It's too obvious, okay.
From a past and to today.
Yes.
The ambition, the stupidity, and the doom, the fate.
And remember to pay your rents.
Yes, and
Yeah.
finally, they will pay the rent.
Yes. You know, this is interesting that now I didn't tell you about my very, very recent project, which is called this Guanzang, and it's in Chinese, and I made it 1.5 years ago. I can show you a trailer maybe later, so you see. So it's a work about a little town again, in which there is a square. And then on that square there's a sculpture hidden in the bush. It's hidden to the extent that people don't see it at all. And it's been there forever. And all these people in town remember it, but they prefer not to talk about it. The young people are not even sure if it exists. And then they prefer not to talk about it, but then suddenly, after years, the sculpture starts to communicate with the passers-by. And it starts to sing. And it says, I would like to ask you a question. And people enjoy the singing because it's beautiful. So they come and listen, but they don't want questions. You know. And then this sculpture starts to sing louder and louder and louder. And then maybe they still enjoy, but gradually it's even louder and they stop enjoying it. And it constantly says, I would like to ask you a question. But they only listen to the singing. They don't want to be asked any question. And then it starts to scream. And then in the meantime, they discuss where the sculpture is coming from, and they